weight of democracy itself. Now, in a time of continued social and political turbulence, our communities remain steadfast in advancing justice and opportunity, not only for ourselves, but for all of those who are marginalized. Now, it's through this commitment that we channel our power, we reshape policy, and we forge progress. Now, here at the Center for Policy Analysis and Research, our mission is rooted in this same vision. We work to inform policy and educate the public, offering timely research and recommendations that address pressing social, political, and economic realities of Black life in America. Now, this session, it really reflects that mission in action. Focused on our Black Policy Playbook, you'll hear from leaders of organizations who have been at the forefront of change, working daily to influence policy and perspectives. We're deeply grateful for their time, their wisdom, and their continued service to communities, and by extension to ours. I also wanted to say too, we do have copies of our playbook. They're over there on the table. It's a little dark in the corner, right to the right of the door when you walk in. So if you haven't had a chance to pick yours up, we encourage you to do so. You'll want to have this as we're going through the discussion and talking, and particularly after the session. I did want to also take this time to acknowledge our session partner, and who is also our partner for this creation of this Black Policy Playbook, the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. Now, the Joint Center exemplifies a deep commitment to issues of racial equity and the uplift of Black communities, and so we thank them for their dedication and ongoing support and partnership. And speaking of the Joint Center, I'd like to now invite Jessica Fulton, former Vice President of Policy and the interim President of the Joint Center, to join me on stage. And we're going to go through a brief overview of this policy agenda before we dive into the discussion with our guest panelists. And so as she is coming up, I'm going to share just a little bit about Jessica. She's a thought leader and a policy consultant with nearly 20 years of experience advocating for public policies to improve conditions for marginalized communities. As an expert on issues at the intersection of race and economic policy, Jessica is a passionate person, passionate about identifying and promoting policies to improve economic outcomes for Black households in particular. And her expertise has been featured in venues such as MSNBC, NPR, the Associated Press, New York Times, and Griot, among other outlets. So please join me in giving Jessica Fulton a round of applause.
You said introduction, and I somehow didn't think that meant a real introduction. So thank you.
I'm gonna give you your dues.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. So as Jonathan said, I'm a senior fellow with the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And the Joint Center really is a research organization focused on understanding the issues facing Black communities and also identifying solutions, right, to tear down structural barriers for Black people in the United States. It really, the organization really seeks to serve as a resource, both to policymakers and to community organizations that care about doing advocacy on behalf of Black communities. So I am grateful to be here today. Also really grateful to have had the opportunity to work with Jonathan on this project.
Thank you, thank you. All right, and so we'll go ahead and go through, we want to just present a little bit of an overview of the playbook so that those who maybe haven't had a chance to read it or get into it yet can have an idea of what exactly this is, all right? And so I know we have some slides that we're going to put up so that folks can see this as we go along with this information. All right, and so as we are waiting for those slides to pop up, there we go. Again, so this policy agenda, Forward Together, the Black Policy Playbook for an Equitable America, again, was something that we developed co-jointly as organizations. If we could advance to the next slide, please. I'm going to tell you just a little bit really briefly about CPAR, which is, again, the policy and research arm of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. We really work to help fulfill the aim and the mission of the CBCF to serve as a Black think tank in support of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, right? Our research and policy agenda is rooted in a firm commitment to open-minded inquiry into economic independence, public health, education, all the things that are affecting the global Black community. And so just a little bit about us as well. Thus far in 2025, we have done some really great work. We have an executive order tracker that we've released with over 40 executive orders tracked. Thank you. Yeah, this is major when we think about the floodgate of these executive actions that have been pushed out in recent months. It feels like years. It's really only been months, y'all. We really want to make sure that we're providing information that is helpful to people around this. We produced this policy agenda with the Joint Center, a few resource guides, research reports, and interactive web sites. So again, go to our website, check out all this amazing work. I have an incredible team that is all here. If you're in the room, any of the CPAR team staff, you can stand up or raise your hand really quickly. A lot of them over there, just giving it up to the rest of the team. But that's a little bit about the CBCF and the Center for Policy Analysis and Research. We could advance.
And just a little bit more about the Joint Center. The Joint Center is actually an organization that was founded in 1970, specifically to support Black activists who were newly elected leaders in Congress. And so over time, our work has really evolved to focus on the ever-changing issues affecting Black communities. Right now, we're focused on tax policy, we're focused on opportunities to build wealth, we're focused on workforce policy, and in particular, how to make sure that Black workers have access to high-quality jobs, as well as tech policy, right? So that's actually a big part of the conference this year, issues related to AI, related to access to technologies and making sure that they're not biased against our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, and so if we can advance the slide, telling you a little bit about just how this project came to be, right? This came out of a conversation between our two organizations, namely to start between Jessica and I. And after some discussion, we realized that there was really a space that we were able to try to help fill in terms of creating a more connected, comprehensive, and cross-cutting policy agenda for Black America. And what really led us to this is that our organizations both have deep connections with other organizations that do similar work, as well as Congressional Black Caucus and other legislative members, right? And so we really wanted to bring something together that we could hand to the CBC and other legislators that many different organizations could use, and that we could also use again to really talk about the interconnectedness of issues that are important for Black communities, right? We know that healthcare impacts economic advancement, which is impacted by education, right? All these things are not, you can't pull them apart. You have to be able to talk about them all in unity, and that was part of the goal of what we did coming together. I think you can go ahead and advance a couple of slides. There we go.
Yeah, and so, you know, Jonathan mentioned that we wanted to work on this project together. I think collaborative is like the key word for how we approach this project. The Joint Center's policy team worked really closely with Jonathan's team at CPAR, that's the acronym, right? Okay, to pull this together. And we also worked really closely with external organizations. Essentially, we identified some issue areas that we felt that we had deep expertise in between the two of our teams, and also that we felt were really important for Black communities. Then we compiled a list of dozens of organizations that were either Black-focused, Black-led, or just had really deep expertise on issues that we cared about. And we reached out to several of them, right? We asked for resources, we asked for their thoughts on how we could shape this thing. We also asked people to just like make some time to review. We did this project last year, so people were very busy, but I'm really grateful that people were able to make the time for us. I think there are two other big things, aside from this being a really collaborative project, that I think it's important to remember. One, we started this work in January of 2024, which means that we did this without understanding what the political landscape would be even in the summer of 2024, and definitely without understanding the outcome of the election. So like that's just a piece of context as you're flipping through the playbook when you take some time to read it later. The second piece is that we chose 7 issue areas, and you all can see them here, and we're gonna go over them quickly, not because we think that these are the only issue areas that affect Black communities, right? But because we had to kind of start somewhere. When we didn't go in depth, we didn't address every single challenge that Black communities could be facing in those places, but we did want to get a good start of where do we think that there is evidence that we could make real progress through policy for our communities.
Absolutely. You can advance the slide.
Right. So, the people who worked on this, I am actually really grateful that I got a chance to work with both the Joint Center team and the CPAR team on this. We met fairly regularly throughout the year last year and really got to know each other's work. And I'm really grateful to all the people listed on this slide for the time that they took outside of their regular day jobs to make sure that we were able to pull something together that is very high quality and evidence-based. So just wanted to give a shout out to them.
All right. So we can advance the slide. So one of the things that we wanted to do really quickly before we bring our esteemed panelists up to discuss the playbook is just go through each of the sections really, really quickly, just make a few highlights around what these are. And again, as Jessica said, we knew from the beginning that this was not going to be fully comprehensive. We wanted something that was going to be comprehensive in the sense that it cut across many different issue areas and highlighted some of the most important things that we know impact Black communities, right? So this is a starting point, as Jessica said. So just keep that in mind as we go through. And so first, again, voting rights and civic engagement. Everybody in this room understands why this is a critical issue for Black people. I don't think anything else really needs to be said. We know that through the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, it marked this historic period in the fight against racial discrimination in voting. But what we've been seeing in recent years is the rolling back of all of this progress, right? Among other challenges that are happening, right? And so in order to really address this, we need to be thinking about strong policies that protect and expand access to the ballot box. And so this section really outlines some of these things that we think are really important. Just a few different organizations, if you're looking for additional information around this, as well as those that were contributing, you could think about the ACLU Voting Rights Project, Black Voters Matter, the Brennan Center for Justice, Fair Fight, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, Southern Poverty Law Center. There are so many organizations. The National Action Network, we have, who's going to be one of our speakers here. So many orgs that are doing this work, and so we wanted to be able to highlight that. You'll be able to find all of that in the policy agenda.
Thank you. We followed that up with economic opportunity and advancement, not just because I really care about economic policy, but because for better or worse, economic power is strongly correlated with political power in this country, right? And so we looked at a few different issue areas where there have just been some really stubborn disparities for Black communities over time, things like housing, things like entrepreneurship. But we also looked at something that Black advocates have traditionally not been as engaged in, which is tax policy. And we know that in this year's budget reconciliation bill, the administration and Congress enacted something that's actually going to widen racial wealth gaps, right? And so we thought it was important that we engage there. We followed on with workforce policy, another one of those kitchen table issues that's really important for Black communities, but that we're not always asked our input about in policy debates. So thinking about opportunities to ensure that Black workers have access to good jobs, that Black workers aren't blocked from participating in any particular occupation or sector, right? And that Black workers are able to benefit from the historic investments that the Biden-Harris administration made in industrial policy in their term. And so organizations that we really look to for support on this and that you may want to take a look at, the Color of Change, Black Economic Alliance, National Black Workers Centers, the Lawyers Committee, LDF. We looked at all kinds of different organizations to inform those sections.
All right, we followed up with an education, right? Again, everybody understands that education is a significant issue for Black folks, particularly in recent years and in the recent months, even more heightened. We've seen egregious attacks against education in the US, right? In particular, the limiting and changing of the scope of what is learned about Black history, right? The reframing of Black history or American history in ways that really negates the importance and the contributions that Black folks have had throughout our history. And then also, all of those changes are doing things to limit the ways in which people can gain education. And we know that that's one of those tactics for control, is when you are not allowing people to be educated, they can't fight for themselves, they don't understand systems, right? They can't produce progress, right? And so we want to make sure that we are addressing this. So a very, very clear issue for all of us. And so again, many different organizations that are listed in our policy playbook that you can check into, like the Center for American Progress or the Education Trust or the Du Bois Policy Institute. So again, tons of folks we want you to be able to connect with and get additional information for about this important topic.
We also took a look at healthcare, which is an ever-present issue in our communities, both because we need to be contending with the social determinants of health, right, things outside of the healthcare system, but also access to healthcare and access to affordable healthcare in particular. And so we did a lot of work in that space, looking at things like Black maternal mortality, looking at access to high-quality nutrition, but also thinking about how we can expand access to healthcare coverage for our communities. We looked to organizations like the Center for Black Health and Equity, and NAACP, and Black Mamas Matter Alliance for work in that space.
Absolutely. And then another one of these areas that we looked at was the criminal legal system, right? So again, highly important for Black people. We have been touched by the system from the beginning, from when they snatched us and brought us here to this country, and we see the progression of this through policing and other legal system practices that exist today, right? We know that Black people face ongoing, unjust, discriminatory treatment at the hands of our legal system. And despite pushes in recent years for reform and change, we've seen the significant rolling back of this progress that we had in particular post-murder of George Floyd. Also what we're seeing now too is despite historically low crime rates in many different cities, the current administration is also sending more police and more law enforcement into these places, in particular democratically run cities, under the guise of lowering crime, right? So we want to make sure that we are addressing this as a clear thing and ensuring that legal system reform is something that is really happening. And so our playbook goes through some examples of things that we could do to advance this topic. Again, organizations that you might be thinking of to look for leadership: Color of Change, Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, National Action Network, the Bail Project, and the Equal Justice Initiative, among many others.
And finally, technology and telecommunications. As I mentioned earlier, that is a big issue at this year's conference for really good reason, right? Technology is rapidly changing, and even though research shows that Black people have really been at the forefront of calling for regulations and policies to address potential discrimination due to technological advancements, our voices are not always heard in those conversations. And so making sure that Black people have genuine access to technology is critical for making sure that we can perform in the changing economy. But it's also really important that we address potential algorithmic bias, misinformation and disinformation, and all of those issues that could end up pushing us further behind as the economy and as technology changes. And so I think that's seven. Those are all the issues.
Right, all these clear issues again. Thank you. Yes. And so again, as we're wrapping up, we really wanted to just be able to provide you with an overview of what you can see in this agenda. Hopefully you understand a little bit better about why this is so important and why this work needs to continue. And even more than that, why it is so important for different organizations, different constituents to come together to work to solve these issues, right? They are intersectional, and through our collective action that we'll be able to create that change. And so with that, we want to make sure that we are now getting to this panel so you can hear from the wonderful experts, many of whom, all of whom actually, have had some kind of touch. Their organizations have some kind of touch on this particular playbook, whether that's submitting information or policy recommendations from the work that they've been doing, reviewing it, or even helping to push it out into other spaces, right? And so we definitely welcome all of them. So at this point, I would love to invite up to the stage Dr. Lauren Perlman, who will introduce our moderator for today's session.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to introduce our moderator, Dr. Andre Perry, who is a senior fellow and director of the Center for Community Uplift at the Brookings Institution. He's also a professor of practice of economics at Washington University in St. Louis. A nationally known and respected commentator on race, structural inequality, and education, Perry is a regular contributor to MSNBC and has been published by numerous national media outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CNN.com. Perry is the author of the books Black Power Scorecard, Measuring the Racial Gap and What We Can Do to Close It, and Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities. So please give me a warm welcome for Dr. Perry.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Man, I love this playbook, and you will too, given this romantic lighting that we have today. But I'm going to just challenge Jessica a little bit. She gave a little bit of caveat about this. A bulk of this was written before the election. But let me be clear. We needed an agenda before this election. We're going to need an agenda after. And so I just want to thank these organizations for pulling this together. And now we're going to have a meaty conversation with people, as was mentioned, who contributed to this work. I'm going to call your name, and when you hear your name, please make your way to the stage. First up to bat, Demetria McCain. Please give her a round of applause. Joined LDF in July of 2024 as its policy director, where she works with senior leadership to set the strategic direction for the organization's legislative, policy, and advocacy work in criminal justice, economic justice, education, and political participation. Demetria joins LDF from the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's where I met her. She also served and was appointed Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary. Next up is my good friend, Damon Hewitt. Damon is the president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law, one of the nation's foremost experts in civil rights litigation and policy. Hewitt has more than 20 years of experience, including prior leadership roles in the nonprofit, philanthropic, and public sectors. Prior to joining Lawyers Committee, he was the inaugural executive director of the Executives Alliance for Boys and Men of Color and was the chief liaison for the philanthropic community to the White House on policy issues impacting young men of color. Vincent Evans, yes, Vincent Evans is the executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus and the largest and most influential bloc of black lawmakers in U.S. history. Since 2022, he has helped shape the caucus's strategy, overseeing legislative priorities, political affairs, and national engagement on behalf of 62 members of Congress. Evans previously served in the White House as Deputy Director of Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs for Vice President Kamala Harris, leading efforts to elevate community voices and advance inclusive policy making. And last but not least, Ebony Riley. She is the Senior Vice President of Policy and Strategic Partnerships at the National Action Network, where she is the highest ranking woman in the organization's history. Riley directs NAN's national policy agenda, working with 140 chapters nationwide to advance strategies that center community needs in the pursuit of civil rights, economic justice, and social equity. Please give these experts a round of applause. Now, we're going to get right into it. I want to give folks initial reactions to the playbook. What struck a chord with you? What resonated? And we'll start with Demetria and work our way down.
All right, hello, testing. Testing. Or you can go to somebody whose mic is live.
Yes, Damien, Ebony, you want to go for it?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. How you doing, good people? For me, thank you all, first of all, to the CBCF and to the Joint Center. I think this playbook was built with quality. I think it captures our lived experiences. And I'm just going to start because I'm the advocate and organizer, go to jail sometimes person on the panel. We are living under someone else's playbook right now. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is Project 2025 in real life happening now. So what you have in your hands is tangible. This is so important for us to pay attention to. So just put it in that context, think about it that way. And I'll stop and let my other colleagues share their reactions.
Yeah, I agree exactly with what Ebony said, but I think what Dr. Perry said earlier is, yes, this was written before the election, but all of these harsh issues and barriers and harms were existing and barriers for Black communities around the country even before this election. So we have nowhere to go but to push harder than what we were pushing before January. So I think it's spot on. We can certainly add more to it at this point, but it's spot on from some of the harms that we've been dealing with already.
Well, first, thank you, CBCF and the Joint Center, and Dr. Perry and colleagues. It's great when you can be up here with people you actually like, and you like working with them too. These are my peoples. We've all come up together. So I would say the playbook is important. It is ambitious. It's thick. I challenge everyone to read it cover to cover and then reread it, and don't just skim for the parts that you already know. If you focus only on certain pieces, focus on the parts you don't know quite well. That's how we learn. What I love about the playbook is that it is grounded in the concept that racial equity is central to American democracy, fully thriving and fully lived. That is clear and patent. I also appreciate that it is obviously action-oriented. You know, they say, Dr. Perry, that either you make policy happen or policy will happen to you. Right? And so this is obviously a way to make policy happen and tangible, action-oriented steps in addition to framing of the issue. So I appreciated that.
Vincent?
You know, I am biased in that I have the opportunity to see the 62 members of the CBC every day up close and personal, doing the work. Everything that is in that playbook builds upon the long, rich history of the caucus on issues that date back to our founding. This foundation would not exist without their leadership. And I want to give credit where credit is due to the president and CEO, Nicole Alston Hillary is here. When she came 3 years ago, she said that this foundation would for the first time work hand in hand with the caucus, because we are one, to ensure that from a policy standpoint, we spoke truth to power. My dear friend, Pastor McBride out of Oakland always says, disorganized truth will always find it difficult to beat an organized lie. We are telling the truth, but we are disorganized. They are lying, but they are organized. And this playbook is an effort to get us organized.
Ooh, I love it. Now let's dig in deep into some of the policy issues. We'll go with Demetria, and we'll make sure your mic's working this time. You know, go into one aspect of the playbook. What resonated? What do you want to work with? Talk about some of the policy directions in aspects of the playbook.
Absolutely. I appreciate the question, and I just appreciate being here, actually. So thank you, Nicole, very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Cox. Obviously, the biggest thing on folks' mind right now, at least Black communities, is voting. Would you agree? It's huge. It's huge. And as much as we have a lot of other issues that we at the Legal Defense Fund, we're 85 years old this year, folks. Thurgood Marshall started us 85 years ago. We have 4 pillars that we work on, which includes political participation, criminal legal system, education equity, and economic justice. But my goodness, how far can we get if we can't vote, right? And so that section about disenfranchisement really is a serious one. And I want to go a little bit deeper into the piece about jails and how they don't allow people to vote. Because folks, I want people to think locally and think at the state level, because that's where we can get some stuff done right now. And so if you are in a community where your county is not making sure that people who are in jail can vote, then that's an issue. There are thousands of people who have not been disenfranchised, who are not under the force of the criminal illegal system, I would say, and they can vote legally because they don't have, let's say, felony convictions, and certainly that depends on what state you're in. But the issue of jail-based voting is very real. So I want you, everybody in this room, to go home and figure out whether or not your county allows, not just allows them, but helps facilitate people to vote when they are in jail, which means they have not been convicted of anything, right? So I just think that piece is so very important, because I'm guessing a lot of people in this audience might not necessarily be directly in touch on a regular basis with people who are facing that type of issue, but their votes matter.
Damon, can you pick up on that? Because voting rights took up a good chunk of space in the playbook. Can you, what in that playbook resonated with you?
Well, I'm going to double click on voting rights just for a sec to lift up, co-sign everything Demetrius said, but also mention the piece about voter intimidation. The intimidation isn't white hoods or bullcon or attack dogs and fire hoses the way it once was. Sometimes it's straight trickeration. It's robocalls targeted to black voters telling you if you vote by mail, bad things will happen, like creditors will use it to collect debts, police will execute warrants, and it will be used to force mandatory vaccinations. It's trickeration like telling you, hey, register online, which is possible in dozens of states, but then vote online for Hillary. That's what we saw in the 2016 election. That's what we saw. You can't vote online anywhere in this country. So these are efforts to trick people and intimidate them either into not voting at all, not voting by a certain means, or doing things a certain way. There are ways to litigate and address it, but with the power of AI, of artificial intelligence, it's more and more difficult to track these. I'm going to switch gears on you, Andre, to talk a bit about one of the aspects of education. One of the 3 pillars lifted up in the playbook on education is about the inability to teach and learn our history, the freedom of educators to teach, the freedom of students to learn. This is important because we know that everything we need to know as black people and families is not taught in school, but more of it should be taught because that's our taxpayer dollars at work. I worry about what I call erasure games. It's not just you can't get a job and opportunity here, but even the history. We're at a time with black folks where simultaneously our future is under threat and they're trying to take away the history in the past as well. We're sandwiched in erasure games. And so we have to draw the line somewhere. As a lawyer, as a erstwhile law professor at times, as an adjunct professor, as a student of critical race theory, I think this is a really critical moment. It's a critical moment not for the traditional tools we use like equal protection of the laws, 14th Amendment, civil rights laws. It's important for the First Amendment because I strongly believe that the First Amendment has to work for us too.
Yep, absolutely.
It can't just be for the KKK when they want to march. It can't just be for freedom of people to use and shout hate speech. We should have a First Amendment right as well, and that has to include the right to learn. That's why at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, we're working with local partners and also some other national orgs to litigate on these issues in multiple states. We have to use the First Amendment to work for our people. Freedom to learn is just as important as somebody else's freedom of religion, just as important as somebody else's freedom of expression, just as important, certainly more important than the KKK having a right to march through your neighborhood and through your town.
Now, before we move on, I want to just take a brief period of time for you just to talk a little bit about the Lawyers Committee's work currently. That I can't say this enough. There are lawyers on the front line defending a democracy or whatever semblance of it we have left. That's right. Can you just share a little bit about what you're doing now to defend democracy?
Sure. Well, look, we have a formula for democracy, and it's in our mission statement. We exist as an organization to ensure that black people primarily have the voice to be heard, the opportunity that's real and not a mythical slippery slope of a ladder of upward mobility, and the power to make the promise of democracy real. Voice, opportunity, and power. So everything we do is under that rubric. We have multiple litigated units, but just to profile some of the things we're doing right now, we are going back to trial again in Texas on October 1st to challenge the re-gerrymandered electoral districts. Hey, go ahead. Now, we just finished the trial 2 months ago on the same issue, but they re-gerrymandered again to gain not just partisan advantage, but racial advantage. Because people say it's partisan, but they got the partisan advantage by targeting districts where black and brown people can elect our candidates of choice. So this is no disguise. Racial and political gerrymandering are flip sides of the same coin in that context. We are challenging the impact of AI on our communities. Earlier this year, we filed a lawsuit against Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, because it turns out we've alleged that their algorithms steer certain content to black people and other content to white people. You may think, what's wrong with that? There's black radio, there's shows we like, but that's when you have a choice of what to watch. They're telling us this is who you are. So certain ads for housing go into certain people. Ads for-profit colleges that take your money and leave you little in the way of meaningful education, they reserve that for black people, not exclusively, but disproportionately. So they think they're holding a mirror to our face, but it's really a distorted mirror of who we are. If you can't have a white-only and a color-only sign on a water fountain or at a bus stop, we should not allow an algorithm to do that to us behind our backs without us knowing.
That's exactly right.
And so we filed that suit, and Meta tried to get it dismissed. We survived the motion to dismiss on every point. Now we'll be in discovery, all up in their business, getting into all this. They'll try to get protective orders to protect their trade secrets, but we're in that as well. Another piece, too, that's really important, and I should say a lot of organizations, LDF, where I used to work, is working on a lot of these issues as well, co-litigating in these cases. We're also suing Trump, challenging his anti-DEI executive orders, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We represent an organization in Chicago called Chicago Women in Trades. What do? They train black and Latino women to get jobs where you can make six figures without a fancy degree. Carpentry, construction, plumbing, places where you don't first think black and brown women, but women belong anywhere they want to be. And if you just get the opportunity and the training, you can make a good living. Well, they were told by the Department of Labor to cease all equity-related activity through their major grant. And they said, wait a minute, everything we do is equity-related. You want us to shut down? They felt no choice but to sue. So we sued on their behalf with our co-counsel and our partners. We got an immediate temporary restraining order. We then got a preliminary injunction that freezes the status quo in place. And the status quo is twofold. One, their grant cannot be terminated. And then second, the judge asked the Department of Justice lawyers, what is this thing you don't want them to do? You don't want them to do illegal DEI. What is that? You know what the DOJ lawyer said, the Trump lawyer said? We don't know what illegal DEI is.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
The judge had a fit. He said nationwide injunction. So now, no grantee and no contractor anywhere in the country for Department of Labor may be forced to certify that they don't do illegal DEI because there is no such thing.
Right.
Wow.
Now, I don't want to be in this U.S. Supreme Court, but we'll take it there if we have to.
Now, I'm going to circle back to Demetria a little bit later and ask a similar question because LDF is another organization on the front line, but I'm going to switch it over to Vincent now because what Damon talked about is largely a defensive strategy. How do we fight against an aggressive administration? But we also need an offensive strategy. We need legislation. What in the playbook resonated with you, with your members? What are they working on in terms of legislation that really stands out for you when reading this playbook?
Well, I will just triple click. When we talk about voting rights, the first two organizations that the CBC calls in this country are the two that are represented here. I am on the phone constantly with these two leaders, and our members are, because for the CBC, voting rights has always been our North Star. Always. It remains the North Star. The right to vote is the right from which all other rights flow. So without it, we have an inability to make an advancement. So first and foremost, we have reintroduced the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Congresswoman Terry Sewell in the House and Senator Warnock in the Senate, both of them proud members of the Congressional Black Caucus. It is these leaders who is helping the CBC right now. We don't have the ability in the Congress to sue, so we call the lawyers that we know. They sue on our behalf. We are in courts right now across the country in several redistricting cases. The fact of the matter is the CBC, more than any other group of lawmakers right now in the Congress, I want to be very clear about this, is under direct assault. Direct assault. Right. In Texas, 4 members of the CBC are under assault. In the state of Missouri, Emmanuel Cleaver, the legislature, in less than 10 days, has attempted to wipe out his seat. Amelia Sykes in Ohio, Lucy McBeth in Georgia, Jim Clyburn in South Carolina, and in my home state of Florida, I suspect come January, when the legislature comes back, the governor of that state will make an advancement. So voting rights remains the North Star because it is is where we know if we can't make any advancement, we've got to make it there. And then the other part is this on the offensive strategy, because you are right. We cannot just come to this week and talk to people about just the problems. We have to have an offensive strategy of all the gains we have made, and all the work we've built upon over the last 60 years. Y'all, we have lost a lot of ground on the economic well-being of our people. And so the CBC, through this foundation, which is noted in this playbook, has offered up a Black wealth agenda. We made great progress over the last 4 years on equity. When you were at the Department of HUD with Secretary Fudge, a former chair of this caucus, and all we did to close the racial wealth gap, to make certain that home ownership was a reality for people. The fact of the matter is, we passed the Fair Housing Act in '68, and you know this better than most. We are regressing. Black home ownership in this country today is at the same level it was in '68. That doesn't make any sense to me. The Black wealth median, the family wealth in this country for a white family in America today is $144,000, and for a Black family, it is $34,000. So of all the advancements we've made, of all the progress we've made, where we have not and where we have more work to do is on the economic well-being of our people. And so we have offered up an agenda, and this playbook speaks from an equity lens about what work we need to still do. And there's a lot of work, particularly on that front.
Now, Ebony, there are a lot of great policy recommendations in the playbook, too many to name. None of it will happen.
Sorry, I had a quick
go
thing
for it.
on that. So I think I want to tie this together and close the loop on this question. We move protests to policy at the National Action Network. We have over 140 chapters, youth, college, and a clergy network. So while they're on the inside, while they're in the courts, while they're making the plan for legislation, we're outside demanding that change, and we mobilize people who may not know the inside plan, because we know when community helps lead with their voices, we help mobilize them and empower them to also go further into community and mobilize others. So that's the protest as part of this. Moving protest to policy is in a tradition and spirit of Dr. King, which is a mission of our organization. And so I'm outside, they're outside, and I know we have a coalition question later, but I just wanted to say
And Dr.
that.
Perry, may I say to that point, we're also working with NAN.
Yeah.
What you often see, or what people don't often see, is we've already talked. They're making a move. We call NAN. We need Reverend Sharpton here with Ebony. The CBC is going to the floor to do this. So there's often a good cop, bad cop, inside out strategy. We are often in conversation together.
But this is what I was actually going to lead into this, because from my perch at a think tank, where I see the disconnect even with my own work, we don't make strong connections with the boots on the ground, the people in the communities. The policy ideas are often disconnected from the people in the communities. When it comes to some of the agenda items, what's NAN working on, and how are they working on some of these policy priorities in a real way? Because it just can't be policy talk.
I thank you for that question. I think that what it looks like on the ground differs depending on where our chapters are and where people are, where they live. It's different needs. All 7 areas exist, but the strategy changes depending on the priority in each area. One of the things that we do is focus on hearing back from communities. So we have physical buildings in each area where we have a chapter. So the community will tell us what the priority is, and then we work and set up programs to help feed that priority. One of the things that we've been focusing on since this last presidential election is strengthening in states, because what we see is that a lot of this is not going to move on a federal level, but how do we take these policies, and check in with our local elected officials, whether it's local, state, what is your local tech chief Chief Tech Officer doing? There's someone in your state that's working on all of this. So we've been focused on training and preserving communities and engagement in education. So it may not look like we're moving the legislation, but we're still teaching. So when it's time to move federally, we had our practice challenging those in our local and state areas on all of these issues. All 7 areas are very prevalent. I think what's important for us, and I'll speak to the federal side of this, I run our Washington, D.C. Bureau. This gives me the information, go back to this playbook, to cite on congressional record, to cite in our comments on the federal level. I have a Black institution, 2 Black institutions to cite, which is very important. No disrespect to the other institutions and think tanks in D.C., but we need to strengthen, invest in, and foster our Black institutions and use that information. Whether we're in college, how many young people in the room today? You're in college, right? Go to the website when it's time to write a paper on voting rights and cite the playbook. Okay, that's one way that you also start to bring
clap
that
up. Yeah, that's good. Clap that up for citation. Coming
I've been
from an
there,
academic.
so I know. Yeah, and I couldn't find anything Black online when I was in college. So this is important in so many areas, not just on the ground, not just in the courts, not just in Congress, but also for your education to know you have an institution to invest in and to look for information.
Demetria, did you want to jump in there?
I just wanted to double down on what Ebony said was so true. Is a phrase that often is said is no policy about us without us, right? And that's so important. And so while we have a policy department, LDF, we have a litigation department, we have an organizing department, and we have our researchers, our Thurgood Marshall Institute, which actually contributed quite a bit to this playbook. But that is so critical. When I talked about jail-based voting, that is some of the work through our organizing department. And when we look at some of the things about the criminal legal system in the playbook, the gang database, that's something our organizers are dealing with. Why? Because they're working with people who are directly impacted. And so all of this stuff is just not theory. It's just not something that we're just making up here inside of the Beltway of Washington, D.C. We're talking about things with directly impacted people. And so working in states, I mentioned earlier, local and state, so very important. The case right now, you might be looking for our president, Janae Nelson. She's not here right now because she's preparing with the team for the Supreme Court argument that's coming up October 15th on Calais. And we've got some folks from Louisiana on that case who are here in the audience. So would you please stand up? These are folks on the ground in Louisiana who are standing up for voting rights. And so we want to make sure that they are undergirded and celebrated because they stood up. So it's all connected. We're just not talking about theory and lawsuits in Congress. It's all connected.
Damien, you want to jump in?
Well, just a quick point. I'm going back to the first question you asked, what do I like about the playbook? What I like about the playbook is maybe what I hope about the playbook is that it can be iterative. Mm-hmm. The major work was done last year. We know where we are now. We know that life moves at the speed of Blackness. Can our policy and our ideas move in the same way? So that's the challenge. I look in the mirror and ask myself, can our work move in that way? Can we and our connectivity move in that way? Can we, the royal we, move in that way? The discussions that happened this week at the CBCF ALC, to some people may feel evergreen, always the same issue. To some people, by the time you get to January, may feel stale. How can we stay with the times? And I love to see this playbook continue to iterate in a way that responds to what people's lived experiences in community on an ongoing basis.
Now, I got about 6 minutes to go and 2 more questions, and I want to spend at least the next 3 minutes talking about cooperation. The Joint Center and CBCF modeled something that we can all utilize during this time, how to work together. How are you moving together in this environment? How are you working with other organizations that can also replicate what we're seeing with this playbook?
I know I gave a quick example, but coalitions, in my experience, move best when each group leads in their own lane, but towards the same goal. What I've learned is people don't care about the process, they care about the outcomes. And so I'll just kick it off to someone else.
Yeah, look, our work every day, to the point about the federal level, is very difficult right now.
Yeah.
We have to work with these leaders and so many other organizations. That's why we brought 10,000 people to Washington this week. Black people in America right now have to be sleeping in shifts. When I am asleep, you need to be up. And when you are asleep, I need to be up.
Say that again.
You know why? Because they are never asleep. That's the coalition. We have to sleep in shifts in this moment. I was on a call the other day with Pastor Jamal Bryant out of Atlanta. And Jamal Bryant said that Andy Young, the former congressman, the former ambassador, said to him, Jamal, I hope for your generation's sake, things only get as bad as they once were. Because if they get as bad as they once were, I can help you. I can coach you out of that. I've been there. But he said, if they get worse, which it looks like they're about to, I can't coach you. I don't have a blueprint. So it requires the beloved community. It's not just organizations, it's everybody at this conference. The question when we leave here on Sunday, which I said to the CBC members, is this: what are we doing Monday morning? We're gonna sit here today, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We got the playbook. What are we doing Monday morning?
That's right.
We had Project 2025 was an open book test.
Yes.
We failed the test.
Yes.
And now we got our own playbook. So on Monday morning, we got to have a plan, and it cannot just be NAN, it cannot just be the Lawyers Committee and LDF and the CBC. It's got to be everybody in here.
Yes, that's
Demetri.
good.
I mean, I believe in giving people something to do, right? So I said, go check on the jail-based voting, right? Something to do is when he says what we're going to do Monday morning, all the people who raise their hand because they're in college, every single one of you need to get on a group chain, get each other's phone numbers, because I can text Ebony at 10 p.m. I can text Damon. I can text Vince. Can you text each other? Because guess what? And we have folks from our Equal Protection Initiative here now. All of your schools and colleges and HBCU funding and PWI funding, that's being threatened. And so you're all in different places in the United States, but you're all experiencing some of the same harms, some of the same barriers coming down the pike. So get connected with each other, because what this person is dealing with over at this school may be something that's on the way, because that's how they organize. They go to one state and they bring it to another state. We saw this with some federal legislation, right? Trying to make us have to show our citizenship to vote. Then they went to the states. They started federal, they went to the states. Get connected. Don't leave this room without meeting with somebody who's of the like-minded as you, because you're in this room, and get their contact information.
Now I'm going to stay with this theme, and we're going to close this out with a call to action. You got to keep it 30 seconds or less. So I know, Damien, you got something, a call for the audience members. What should they do moving forward? What are they going to do in the morning?
Everybody's talking about the elections next year and what happens. I want you to worry about the elections right now. I want you to make sure that you are registered to vote and that you check your registration status if you believe you've already registered. You can go or call 866-OUR-VOTE. You can go to 866ourvote.org. That's the Election Protection Coalition. I will also mention this. The mission, the charge, is really a political project. The political project is a math problem. The math problem is to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. We always think we got more people. We have more organizations than ever. We have more CBC members than we ever have.
Yeah.
So what if nothing changes on our watch in a positive way? We have to make the whole greater than some of the parts. So take the actions people are directing and urging and make sure you do it together.
Let's go, Ebony.
Yeah, what I would say is that this is a tactical blueprint, right? So the first thing I would say do Monday morning is go to your local elected officials, look them up, start to see if some of these priorities match their priorities. They're running again next year. It's a good time to sign up to see what they have going on. In addition to that, I would say that this is something that is also a conversation starter. When you have these debates, when you see things on social media, use this as a reference, go through through it and see if what the rhetoric is matches what says in here, because this is of quality and this is for community by community.
Demetria?
I would just say 202-224-3121. Because
Repeat that.
everybody doesn't live with the CBC member in their district. That is the number to contact your congressperson. So do what Ebony says, also on the federal level, and call your congressperson and tell them about the policies that need to be supported. If you already have a congressperson that's on board, say thank you.
The number again, repeat it. And then
202-224-3121.
My call to action is very clear. I remember Congressman James Clyburn said something to me one time. Vince, if your house is on fire and your house is burning and you're not home, you can't put out the fire. Y'all, the house is on fire if you did not know. So wherever your home is, you need to go home and you need to help put out the fire. If your home is in the NACP, if your home is in NAN, if your home is at the Joint Center, LDF, on a college campus, at the AME church, the Zion, wherever your home is, go home, put out the fire, and make sure you take the playbook with you and tell everybody else to help you put out the fire.
Please give this illustrious panel a round of applause. That was excellent. Jonathan, are you going to close us out? No, well, I get the pleasure of closing us out. Well, thank you. Well, you can give me applause too. Show me a little love. But thank you all for coming and have a wonderful ALC.